You're here because you're new to Dead by Daylight and you want some help with your killer games. Well, I got 10 tips for you. Let us begin. Number 1, understanding your killer. This might sound a bit like a weird one, but in actuality it is very important to understand the killer you're using. Now, of course, you're going to use all sorts of killers, but just picture the one you really want to main or the one you have a lot of fun with, and you got to understand, how tall are they? How good are you going to be able to mind game with them if people can see you over objects and whatnot? Or just how big the red glow is depending on where you're looking at. Another thing is every killer has their own individual terror radius. This is the heartbeat that alerts survivors to when the killer is approaching. Certain killers have bigger ones. Some characters have hums, like Huntress and Trickster, that you hear before the terror radius that still alerts people, so you need to know how to manage the terror radius. 3, every killer has a set speed. Almost every killer is a similar kind of speed, but if you're 110%, that means you're much slower, and are going to have a much harder time catching up to a survivor than a 115% killer. There's also Nurse, who of course is only 90% speed, but her ability more than makes up for that. In addition to the killer's base stats that they all share, every killer, of course, has their own unique power. Read up on what the power does, and it is important to understand various strategies for the power. If you're a ranged killer, you need to get good with aiming it. If you're a killer that does damage over time, understand when to use it and when not to. If you're a killer who is anti-loop, you need to understand how to shut down the loops properly based on your ability, whether it's slowing down the survivor, or preventing them from using a pallet, or outright damaging them in some non-direct way. Number 2, when to chase. One of the issues with Dead by Daylight is it isn't really balanced around the most fun aspect, the chase. Killers want to chase survivors, knock them down, and put them on the hook, and then go after the next one. The problem is your generators can fly very quickly once you're facing competent players. So the important tip to remember here is when to chase survivors. If you got a survivor who's jumping windows back and forth, clicking at you with their flashlight teabag and trying to get your attention, it's obvious they're either very confident they can run you for a very long time, or they're trying to distract you from their teammates. Which means in most situations it is ideal to ignore this person who wants your attention because they're not doing anything productive, and going after the survivors who either aren't as good in chase or are on your generators to kick them off of it. Of course, the best part about running around is pushing survivors off of generators to use your gen defense perks to regress them in time, and prevent them from powering the doors as soon as the game effing starts. There's also the fact that some survivors are just naturally very good at looping. Certain streamers make it very obvious even they can just 360 into your point of view and you're whiffing on them rather than just using dead hard at the right time. Survivors that are very good at looping can waste your time for minutes, which means you are losing the game. One chase can end the game for you. So if you're struggling against someone and you can't catch them within 30 seconds and do some damage, then the best thing to do is to leave them and go after another nearby survivor. Or splitting off mid-chase, even if you can catch the person before you, and going after the other person in a more exposed area that they can't run to safety at. Managing when to chase and how quickly you can end chases can help you win a game a lot quicker than you might realize. Number 3, understanding loops. In Dead by Daylight, all the various structures that have pallets and windows attached to them that you and survivors are going to find yourselves running around a lot are called loops. These structures are where survivors loop the killer. They run around and around the area following specific set paths for them to get as much distance and waste as much of your time as possible. Survivor running chases isn't about winning the chase so much as it's about winning it for the killer. Survivors just need to waste the killer's time. The more they do that, the better they perform. There are different names to the different loops, and you need to understand which loops you should be going after and how to handle them. For example, there are various types of pallets. There's an unsafe pallet, which is a pallet between two very tiny structures that, if the survivor is on one side, you can likely hit them from either end just by making them vaulted at the wrong time. Those are unsafe loops. There are the just safe loops, normally consisting of one big side and one little side. These are the most balanced loops where both sides have an ability to get to each other. The survivor drops the pallet, and then you can possibly mind game them into messing up so you can still hit them without breaking the pallet. As soon as you break the pallet, they're going to run away, and you're going to lose a lot of distance along with your bloodlust. Killers chasing survivors for extended periods of time will gain bloodlust. It'll appear when you hear the little whoosh sound effect of the wind, and it makes you go a little faster so long as you're still in chase. But as soon as you break a pallet or lose sight of that survivor, you're going to lose your bloodlust and have to start over. The worst type of pallet, of course, is what's referred to as the God pallet. This is a pallet that once the survivor drops it, there is no way you're going to be able to get them so long as it is down, unless they run away from the structure. No matter what end you get to, they will have plenty of time to get to the other side, and there's nothing you can do. Best thing to do is to force survivors to drop these pallets as quickly as possible, just to break them and take them out of the game. The most common structure, and one of the most powerful, is ironically called the Killer Shack, which is where the killer would come from, but is one of the strongest loops in the game because of the window and pallet setup. There are 2 doors. Survivors ideally would want to loop the window 3 times over, and it is incredibly hard to mind game this properly. Even if you turn your head around and keep the red glow, survivors are always going to sit in a corner and wait for you to come out of one end or the other. You want to push survivors through the pallet-sided doorway to force it, because it is harder for them to use the window. And you want to force this shack pallet down as quickly as possible, because whether you're inside or outside the structure, there is no way to get someone once this pallet is down. Understanding the loops and how to correctly counter survivors at them and catch up to them as quickly as possible, and or force the pallets down as quickly as possible, is crucial in your chasing experience as this killer. Number 4, waiting to react. This one's a little different. The idea of wanting to catch survivors as quickly as possible will always be in your mind once you're in chase, so you'll be quick to lunge and hit them from as close as possible. However, waiting to react can sometimes be more helpful than just going for a blind hit. For example, if you're a ranged killer aiming at a survivor, of course, they're going to try and bob and weave to make you mess up. Best thing to do is let them attempt to bob and weave and predict their movements, knowing which way they're going to go. Some survivors are very predictable, and they do the same move over and over again to make you mess up your ranged attack. Others will try to mix it up and force you to correct your aim over and over again. Best thing here is to wait until you're confident you can hit them before they reach cover. Sometimes you'll just have to go for a lucky throw, but normally waiting and not just pulling back and firing right off the bat is the best course of action. Another common thing is you're going to run into a lot of survivors that use Dead Hard. Dead Hard is one of the most powerful perks in the game, if not the most powerful perk. Once injured, a survivor simply has to press E, and they shoot forward for a little bit to gain a little distance, and during this point they gain iframes, which makes them invulnerable to attacks during this time. So, if timed perfectly, when a killer swings, the survivor will actually invincibly shoot through and the killer will miss. Now with the new validation, it'll actually appear that you hit the survivor, but they're still running around. Survivors usually use Dead Hard to either gain distance to get to a pallet in time if they make a mistake, or while a killer is chasing them, they do it to make the killer whiff their attack and suffer from the attack cooldown. Simply getting up behind a survivor and waiting for them to Dead Hard, or bonking your bell as Wraith really quickly to try and make them, to force the Dead Hard out of them, will result in almost a likely down, as Dead Hard itself without the killer missing oftentimes can get you that extra hit in time. So if you know a survivor has Dead Hard, wait till you're right behind them and see if you can get them to use their perk before you even go in for that swing. Number 5, using perks to fix weaknesses. As a new player, you're going to quickly learn what you're really good at and what you're really bad at and what you need to work on when you start playing more. Killer perks can help them with a variety of issues, such as regressing generators, locating survivors, or simply applying harder map pressure. Depending on what you struggle with the most, these are the kinds of perks you want to focus on. If you're finding it really hard to even find where survivors are, or if you're stuck in those situations where 2 of them just start harding, best thing to do would be start using aura perks such as Discordance, Barbecue and Chili, even through Tremors. These perks are aura reading or in some way or another pinpoint where the survivors' locations are. If you find your generators are going too fast, then you'll want to invest in your gen defense perks, which can regress generators or help you get to them better and stop survivors from completing them just as quickly. And finally, if you find yourself struggling in chase, or you have a specific playstyle in chase that you always go through pallets and you always vault windows, you'll want to use perks that help you in chase, such as Unrelenting, although it's not that good, Enduring, and Bamboozle. Perks that basically give you an edge in chase that can allow you to take bigger risks and still catch up to survivors in the same amount of time otherwise. It's all in what you need, what you want to fix your weaknesses as best as you can using these various perks, and of course figuring out which killers to purchase if you don't want to buy all of them to get your hands on the best perks for you. Hey, thanks for checking out my video. Be sure to hit that like button if you enjoyed. It does help it perform better. Number Number 6, avoiding getting blinded. One of the only weapons survivors can use against killers is the ability to blind them. Killers are very susceptible to light because the entity apparently hates them. So survivors will either bring various flashlights and add-ons to shine in the killer's face to blind you, or they'll bring various perks such as Blast Mine and the Flashbang Grenade, which can also result in blinding. If a killer is blinded, they can't see and their hearing becomes impaired for a short while. In addition, the killer, and more commonly used, if the killer picks up a survivor to carry them to a hook, if they are blinded at the perfect time, they will actually drop the survivor and the survivor can run away while getting stunned at the same time. Getting blinded can be extremely annoying, but there are certain ways to deal with it. The best strategy to get used to, even if you don't know survivors have a bunch of flashlights, is to look at a wall. Whenever you down a survivor, best thing to do is face the nearest structure with your face in it. That way when you pick them up, your face will go inside the structure and it is incredibly hard to be blinded. Please note, pulling a survivor out of a locker, you are unable to move during this animation, which means if a survivor is nearby with a flashlight, they will be able to blind you during this time, so making sure you're not vulnerable. If you know survivors are going for those cheeky flashlight saves, best thing to do is when downing a person, if you sense someone might be nearby, scout the area real quick and try to hit them away. If survivors will non-stop bomb rush you to try and save with the flashlight, best thing to do is to scare them off and then just face the other direction and pick them off. Since you're faster, you'll likely be able to pick up the survivor beforehand. Also, if you find yourself chasing survivors, they can chain blink flashlights. So if they blind you once and you keep chasing after them, even if you're perfectly tracking them while blinded, they can quickly blind you again and repeat the process. You'll hear the little scorching sound effect to your eyes. Killers can avoid getting blinded by, especially when flashbangs are dropped nearby, by looking down at the floor or looking straight up. The light, even when shined perfectly in their face, will not affect them. You can also break the perk Lightborn, but for some sick reason, people think this perk is busted, which isn't true. Number 7, Red Glow Mind Games. This is a fun one. Every killer produces a red glow or red glowy stain from their face whenever they're walking around. The killer can't see this, but the survivors can. There's no way to get rid of it unless the killer goes undetectable, but those are only for certain status changes and or abilities. The red glow helps survivors pinpoint where you are in chase, which is how they're able to stay alive for so long, but to a degree, killers can use this to their advantage and mind game survivors. For example, if you see a survivor heading towards a window from a doorway, you can shine your red glow in that doorway while going past it, and hopes that they vault the window and you can catch up to them quicker. Another good way is when looping around structures, killers will tend to show their red glow one way, then walk backwards while keeping the red glow facing away from the direction they're moving in, so that way the survivor doesn't know, and then quickly turning back around once you come around the corner to surprise the survivor if they're not prepared for it. Maintaining your red glow, or simply just turning your head at various times in chases, can throw off survivors for a quick double back, and you can get those cheeky hits in and end the chases much quicker. Number 8, Gen Defense. As you know, killers have to defend 7 generators and prevent 5 of them from being completed, otherwise the survivors will be able to power the doors, open them up, and leave. And you don't want them to leave, you want them to perish in your realm. So, best way to defend your gens, other than seeing their auras and walking up to them to chase survivors off of them, is to use gen defense of some sorts. Every killer has the ability to kick a generator. This takes about 2 seconds if you hold down your action command on it, and the killer will kick the gen and it'll begin regressing. This is awful. You almost never want to do this because base gen regression for a killer is 1/4 the speed of one survivor repairing. So if a survivor spent 30 seconds repairing a generator and you kick it, it will take roughly 120 seconds for that generator to regress completely. And survivors simply need to tap, which takes 0.2 of a second to prevent this regression from continuing. Only kick generators and waste your time if there's no one nearby and you're confident you can actually get some decent damage out of it. Most killers will tend to either ignore kicking gens or use various gen defense perks. Ruin is the best, as soon as a survivor lets go of a gen, if no one's working on it, it will proceed to regress at 200 base regression speed, or 1/2 the speed of a repairing survivor. Still quite weak, but you don't have to kick it, and it can do some heavy damage. Of course, Ruin is a hex perk, meaning your hexes can be broken. These are the little totems around the map, and if a survivor breaks Ruin, you lose that ability. There's also Pop Goes the Weasel, and the new Scourge Hook, which will apply some good gen damage. You, of course, always want to be damaging and regressing gens when it does not fault you during chase times in order to maintain your generator pressure on the map. Number 9 is skillful versus scummy. Dead by Daylight has one of the most toxic gaming communities in the world. Many people have different ideas on what a win is, and many people have different ideas on how people should play this game. The devs have made it clear, unless you are outright hacking into the game, anything else is fair game. This means all the dirty tactics killers have and can use are different variables of considered scummy and or skillful. This relates to camping, slugging, and tunneling. Camping is the process of once someone is on the hook, you stand either nearby or patrol the immediate area to intercept anyone coming to save that person or to ensure they die on the hook. Tunneling is once someone is saved from the hook and you know they are injured and have a hook state, you simply proceed to focus on that person to get them out of the game as quickly as possible. Slugging is, as it might appear in the game, leaving someone in the downed state where they're just laying on the floor like a slug in order to keep them from doing anything productive and going after other people in the meantime. Now, some killer players take this to the extreme, and as soon as the game starts, they find someone, down them, hook them, and just stand there hitting them on the hook. This is a lot more toxic than strategy, because the strategy here is either people will bomb rush the hook and trade out while doing the generators, or simply just focus generators, and this one person dies, and the others get out, and you have accomplished basically nothing other than you have no skill. Tunneling can be seen by all angles as a rude thing. No one wants to be tunneled, but sometimes you need to do these kinds of things. Leaving 4 survivors on the map is extremely dangerous when just allowed to do their thing. As you're chasing one person, you have at least 2, if not 3 other people working on generators, which means they are popping within 40 seconds each. Tunneling someone out of the game and making it a 1v3 makes the game incredibly easy for a killer, although they can still lose this situation, as you ideally want to have only 3 survivors left with still 2 to 3 generators still working. Slugging survivors at certain times can also be helpful. Downing someone that has just been saved, but then ignoring DS and going after another survivor and downing them as well and focusing on them means you have 2 people not being productive at once and resulting in the other teammates having to stop what they're doing and coming to help them. There are certain situations where a killer's back is against the wall, and they might need a camp or tunnel. There are strategic times to use this, but it is knowing when to do so. If you find that you have someone downed and you have someone on the hook, and you have no generators left, best thing to do is to stand by and wait for the survivors to come rescue their friend, and attack them, or at the very least confirm that kill. If you know a survivor is vulnerable and they are right next to you, basically giving you the go-ahead to take them out of the game, rather than actively wasting your time pursuing them, it is a good time to at least down them, if not tunnel them and apply some extra pressure, forcing that survivor to have 2 hook states early off and play super safe, meaning they're not going to be taking risks like their other compatriots. You ideally don't want to be a scummy player, and a lot of players don't want to use these tactics. Understand that the devs have explained that these tactics are not bannable offenses, and in certain cases it can be a smart play to make, such as having 2 survivors in the basement to keep an eye on it if you need to maintain that pressure. If you simply don't care, then simply do whatever your heart's content, and as soon as you hook someone, go to the other end of the map and chase someone else. There is no correct way to play, but there are strategic times to use these various tactics. And number 10, play Survivor. If you've seen the Survivor tip side of this video, you knew I said to play Killer as number 10. Well, here I'm going to tell you to play Survivor. It might be tempting to simply just play Killer, but only maining one side in an asymmetrical game can oftentimes leave players to create misconceptions about the other side being too overpowered, or simply having unfair advantages, or creating ideas that you are able to conquer any type of player when in reality you haven't even scratched the surface. Playing Survivor can help you understand where they're going to be on a map, how they're going to try to avoid you, and what they're going to be doing at certain times in the game. If you know where survivors are going to be going on gens in order to avoid you, you know where to go and when to strike. If you know survivors are likely going to bomb rush a hook and are nearby when you hook someone, you know they're going to be around trying to save that person immediately or simply blind you with flashlights like stated before. Playing Survivor also helps you understand the loops and how to avoid the killer. So as killer, you know what strategy survivors are going to do and how they are going to run loops and how you can properly shut down the loop, cut them off, and or out mind game them yourself. As the killer, you are supposed to be the power role, and sometimes this doesn't seem true as the survivor has a lot to work with, but using more than just the game gives you, you can outplay the survivors, force them to make mistakes, and start playing on their weaknesses and taking advantage of the pressure you gain for yourself. So playing Survivor, understanding it, can help you become a better killer. If you made it this far into the video, thank you so much. I very much appreciated. If you want more of these helpful videos, please consider subscribing and checking out my other videos. I like to do a lot of fun stuff here at the King's Nerd Cave channel. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and I will see you in the next one.